Rock Lee was born without the ability to use chakra for ninjutsu or genjutsu. In the world of Naruto, this is a devastating limitation. Virtually every combat technique available to shinobi relies on chakra manipulation. Without it, a person cannot walk on water, cannot create elemental attacks, cannot use the signature abilities that define every major fighter in the series. Rock Lee was told as a child that he would never be a real ninja. His instructors assessed his abilities and concluded that the gap between what he could do and what the profession required was too wide to close. Guy Sensei disagreed. Guy took Lee as a student and gave him a single pathway forward, taijutsu, the physical combat art, developed to a level that no one had ever reached before because no one had ever needed to rely on it exclusively. Lee trained his body beyond what human physiology is designed to withstand. He wore weighted training devices on his legs for years, building muscle density and leg strength that made his movement speed almost incomprehensible in combat. All of this was preparation for the 8 inner gates, a technique that forces the body's own chakra pathway system open beyond its natural limits, removing every biological restriction that keeps the human body functioning safely. The human body imposes limits on itself deliberately. Muscles do not operate at full capacity because doing so would tear the tendons that anchor them. The heart does not beat at maximum speed continuously because doing so would destroy it. The 8 inner gates remove every one of these restrictions simultaneously. Opening the first gate increases physical strength and speed dramatically. Each successive gate multiplies those effects. Opening the 7th gate pushes the user far beyond anything a human body should be capable of producing. The skin turns red. Blood vessels rupture beneath the surface. The body begins tearing itself apart from the inside while still moving, still fighting, still generating force that no opponent in the series can match without extraordinary power of their own. When Rock Lee opened 5 of the 8 gates during his fight against Gaara in the Chunin exams, he moved at speeds that Gaara's sand defense, which had never failed to protect him before, could not track. He landed hits on Gaara. He did it while his body was destroying itself with every movement. The aftermath left both of Lee's arms and both of his legs shattered by the recoil of his own technique, not by Gaara's counterattack, by the force his own muscles generated against his own skeleton. His recovery took months and was not guaranteed. The medical assessment was that the injuries might be permanent. Rock Lee had pushed a technique that the human body is not designed to survive and paid for every second of it in bone and muscle tissue. Guy Sensei opened all 8 gates during his fight against Madara Uchiha, a man who had become effectively immortal after absorbing the 10 tails and become the host of the combined power of every tailed beast. At that point in the 4th Ninja War, Madara could not be harmed. Every technique the Alliance threw at him failed. Guy made a choice. He opened all 8 gates knowing precisely what it meant. The 8th gate, the gate of death, forces the heart to pump blood so fast and at such pressure that the blood itself ignites, turning red and burning through the skin as steam. The user's body begins incinerating from the inside. The attacks generated at this level of output are so powerful that they visibly reshape the landscape. Guy's final technique, Evening Elephant, produced shockwaves that hit Madara hard enough to damage him for the first time in the entire war. Madara, who had been untouchable, was pushed back. Then Guy used the Night Guy technique, moving at speeds that bent space itself, and the kick landed with enough force to crack Madara's body. Madara said it was the closest to death he had felt in his immortal state. Guy's leg shattered completely on impact. His body began to collapse. He was dying in real time, burning alive from the inside, saved only by Naruto's intervention, which used Hagoromo's power to halt the death process at the last possible moment. Guy survived, but the technique took everything it promised to take, and only failed to kill him because of an intervention that had never existed before in the history of the series, and would not exist again. Human transmutation in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is not a battle technique. It is not used in combat. It is used in grief. which makes it significantly more devastating in terms of what it costs. Alchemy in the world of Full Metal Alchemist operates on the principle of equivalent exchange. To create something, you must sacrifice something of equal value. Human transmutation is the attempt to create or resurrect a human life, which means the cost is assessed in human terms. Edward and Alphonse Elric lost their mother to illness when Edward was 11 and Alphonse was 10. They had spent years studying alchemy, becoming extraordinary practitioners at ages when most people are still learning the fundamentals. They used that knowledge to attempt to bring their mother back. The transmutation circle they drew was precise. Their preparation was thorough. It did not matter. The attempt to create a human body pulled them both into the gate of truth, a dimension at the threshold of all alchemical knowledge, where a towering door opens and something reaches out and takes something from whoever enters. What it takes is calibrated to what the person knows, what they value, and what they are attempting to do. Alphonse lost his entire body. Edward lost his left leg. When Edward tried to anchor Alphonse's soul to a suit of armor using his own blood, performing alchemy with no preparation, no transmutation circle, working from desperation alone, the gate took his right arm. Edward was 11 years old when this happened. He lost 2 limbs attempting to resurrect his mother and failed completely. What came out of the transmutation was not her, was not anything that had ever been her, was a mass of biological material assembled incorrectly that died within seconds. The law of equivalent exchange did not permit the transaction. It took what it was owed and gave back nothing. Edward spent years afterward wearing auto-male prosthetics, mechanical replacements built from metal that required surgical attachment to the nervous system, and carrying the knowledge that the worst decision he ever made cost him his arm and his brother's body before either of them were old enough to understand what they were attempting. Izuku Midoriya inherited One for All from All Might and spent the first year of using it destroying himself with it. One for All is a stockpiling quirk, a power that accumulates and amplifies over generations, passed from holder to holder, growing stronger each time. By the time it reached Izuku, it had been developed through 6 previous holders and carried an amount of raw power that Izuku's body, which was born quirkless and had never developed the physical reinforcement that quirk users naturally build, was completely incapable of containing. Using One for All at full output shattered every bone in whatever limb he channeled it through. Not fractured, shattered. The arm after the first use at the sports festival looks like the bones had been put through a grinder. Recovery Girl, the school's medical hero, could heal him, but healing consumed his own stamina, and the repeated use meant that the total damage was compounding, and she eventually refused to continue treating self-inflicted injuries at the scale he was generating them. Izuku's training arc across the first 2 seasons of My Hero Academia is fundamentally a story about a person attempting to use a tool designed for a different body and working out how much of his own skeleton he can afford to sacrifice per fight while still walking away. He trained specifically to increase the percentage of One for All he could channel without shattering bone, going from 5% output to 8, then higher. Each increment purchased through months of training and the accumulated structural damage of every previous use. The full power applications were reserved for situations where the alternative was worse than the injury, which meant that every time Izuku used One for All without a support system around him, the decision was a calculation about how broken he was willing to be to solve the problem in front of him. The Reaper's Death Seal is the technique used by the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, during his final battle against Orochimaru. Orochimaru had resurrected the 1st and 2nd Hokage using the impure world reincarnation technique, forcing the bodies of the dead to serve his purposes, and Hiruzen was 69 years old and fighting in a body that had spent decades accumulating the wear of constant combat. He was not in a position to defeat Orochimaru directly. He was not going to win through force. He used the Reaper Death Seal instead. The Reaper Death Seal summons the Death God, a vast spectral entity that manifests behind the user and drives its arm through their body, reaching forward through them to pull the target's soul out from their chest. The technique kills the user unconditionally, regardless of outcome, regardless of success, regardless of whether the mission is accomplished. The death god takes both souls, the targets and the casters. Hiruzen used it to seal away the arms of Orochimaru's soul, permanently removing his ability to use arm-based jutsu for years. He did not kill Orochimaru. The technique did not allow him to finish what he started because his aging body gave out before the process completed. He died with his hands inside the chest of the man who had destroyed his village, having permanently crippled him rather than eliminated him, having paid the absolute maximum price the technique could extract. The death god does not negotiate. It does not accept partial payment. It simply takes what was agreed to and leaves the transaction complete.
Ichigo Kurosaki's Mugetsu is a technique that exists at the end of a transformation process that he was explicitly warned would cost him everything. Isshin Kurosaki told his son before he used the final Getsuga Tensho that using it meant becoming the Getsuga itself, merging with the energy of his Zanpakuto spirit so completely that it consumed the Shinigami powers he had developed over 3 years of combat. Ichigo trained inside his inner world with Sengetsu, his Zanpakuto spirit, to reach the final Getsuga Tensho with full knowledge of what it cost. The technique released a wave of black energy that overwhelmed Aizen Sosuke's transcended form. Aizen, who had absorbed the Hogyoku and transformed into something that had moved beyond the reach of anything Shinigami power could touch, was stopped. The Mugetsu did not kill him, but it weakened him to the point where the Hogyoku's own judgment turned against him, revoking the power it had granted because Aizen's desire for it had been replaced by something else. Ichigo lost his Shinigami powers completely after using Mugetsu, not temporarily, not partially. They were gone. He returned to the world of the living as a normal human being and spent 17 months unable to see spirits, unable to use any of the abilities he had built his identity around, unable to interact with the people and the dimension that had defined the last 3 years of his life. For a person whose entire developmental arc was constructed around what he could do and who he could protect, losing everything he had developed was a consequence that outlasted the fight by a significant margin. He eventually regained his powers through a different mechanism, but the version of himself that used Mugetsu ceased to exist the moment the technique completed. The founding Titan's power, as used by Eren Yeager at the end of Attack on Titan, is not destroyed by its use, but the person using it is. The Founding Titan is the most powerful ability in the series. It connects all subjects of Ymir through the Paths dimension. It can alter their bodies, their memories, their biological structure. Whoever activates it in its full capacity can speak to every Eldian alive simultaneously and issue commands that cannot be refused. Eren used it to activate the rumbling, the awakening of hundreds of millions of wall titans, the hardened giants that had been dormant inside the 3 walls for over a century, and the directive to march them across every nation on Earth outside Paradise Island. The scale of what the Founding Titan's full activation produces is beyond what any other technique in any series covered here approaches. The cost is not the technique destroying the user's body in the moment of use. The cost is that Eren designed the entire sequence of events, his own capture, his apparent radicalization, the mission to Marley, the alliances formed and broken, specifically to arrive at the moment of activation. And he knew, through the Attack Titan's ability to receive memories from future holders, that the sequence ended with Mikasa cutting off his head. He did not find another way out. He did not attempt to survive. He constructed the path to activation, knowing it was also the path to his death, and then walked it voluntarily over the course of years. The Founding Titan's full power required a user willing to be the last thing it ever consumed. Eren Yeager was 17 when he first transformed. He was 19 when Mikasa found him inside the Titan's mouth and finished what had been decided before either of them was born. The 8 Trigrams sealing style used by Minato Namikaze during the Nine Tails attack on Konoha falls into the same category as the Reaper Death Seal, a technique whose cost is the user's life, deployed at a moment when no other option remains.
Minato was the fourth Hokage, considered the fastest ninja who had ever lived, and he fought the Nine-Tails when it was being controlled by Obito Uchiha's Sharingan on the night of Naruto's birth. He could not kill the Nine-Tails. Destroying it would have redistributed its chakra back into circulation and allowed it to reconstitute elsewhere. He could not contain it indefinitely using external sealing methods. He split the Nine-Tails chakra, sealed half into himself using the Death God, and sealed the other half into his newborn son using the 8 Trigram sealing style, a technique designed to allow the Jinchuriki to access the sealed power over time rather than being overwhelmed by it immediately. The 8 Trigram seal also imprinted Minato's own chakra into Naruto, designed to manifest at the specific moment when Naruto would need guidance and the seal would need reinforcement. Minato was 24 years old when he died. His wife Kushina, who had been the Nine-Tails' previous Jinchuriki, died the same night from the injuries sustained when the creature was forcibly extracted from her. They died within minutes of each other, having just sealed a monster into their infant son, and left him with a village that did not, for many years, understand what he was carrying or why. The technique worked exactly as intended. Both of them knew what it cost before they used it. If you like this video, turn on the notification bell and subscribe for more.